Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you are a new user, my name is Nikki. For those of you that are returning, welcome back. Today I want to talk about my hospital stay during the COVID pandemic, while I delivered and after delivery, what happened. Before I went into the hospital, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of articles and I looked up a lot of information concerning what I was going to be in for the hospital. I know you can't really prepare for delivery, but I tried the best that I could to kind of get a gauge on what I should be looking out for, what I should be aware of. There were a lot of articles that were coming up. There was a lot of information being passed around that African American women were dying disproportionately to their counterparts in hospitals during pregnancy and delivery, and some women did not have a really good experience with the doctors and the nurses and the people coming in and out of their rooms when it comes to labor and delivery. And I just kind of wanted to talk about my experience. It was overwhelmingly positive, fantastic, and great. And enough words cannot be said about the doctors and the nurses that took care of me, breaking my water, getting me through labor. I was in labor for almost 18 hours, finding out that nothing else was progressing, and so they needed to do a C-section, to recovery, to leaving the hospital. It was just one right after another. It was great. I could not speak highly enough about how I felt being taken care of while I was there. So I got to the hospital, and unfortunately for COVID, you could only have one support person in the room with you, at the hospital with you. That was probably one of the toughest things that I dealt with. When I first found out I was pregnant, the very first appointment and visit that I went to, I took my parents, and that was in March. And that was the first and last time that I had anybody with me for any of my appointments, unfortunately. So them allowing you to have one support person at the hospital was nice, but I had to choose between my parents, my best friend, and my child's father. My parents are elderly. I am in quarantine with them as we speak, but because of their age and the risk factor of them going in the hospital and the fact that we could not change support people, I made the very tough decision to unfortunately tell them not to come to the hospital with me. It was much more difficult for me with my best friend because she's not elderly, and truth be told, that is who I really, out of the option between her and the father of my child, that's who I really wanted to be in the hospital with me. As my pregnancy progressed, I became much more aware of how patient and how supportive and just how on task he was to make sure that I was okay in the hospital. And so I talked to my best friend. I remember sitting her down and being like, this is his first child. This is my first child. If something happens and this is the only child we have together, I don't necessarily want him to miss out on seeing his child be born. And she was just amazing about it and said, this is how it should be. This is the way that it needs to be. He deserves to be in there, in the room, in the hospital with you. So I had to tell my parents, unfortunately, no. And then I had to tell my best friend no. So the father of my child came as my support person, and he was awesome. He was amazing. He did fantastic. He did everything that I needed him to do, and then some. He was just went completely above and beyond. So we got to the hospital, and my water was broken. And from there to labor to the nurses coming in and telling me that unfortunately nothing else was progressing, so we needed to do an emergency C-section. The nurses were fantastic. The doctors were absolutely fantastic. I never once felt like I was doing too much emotionally. I never once felt like because I didn't have an MD behind my name, I was just supposed to be ignored, and nothing that was coming out of my mouth was supposed to be taken into account. I felt like the nurses knew that because my parents weren't there, that was kind of part of their job to kind of step in and be that motherly figure that I needed. I remember I was flooded with epidural because we were getting ready to do the emergency C-section. And I looked at one of the nurses. She was about, I would say, like early 50s. And we had talked, so I knew that her children were grown. I'm 30, and I think a couple of her children were around my age or older than me. And I was like, please, 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 like, just make sure that nothing happens to me in there, because I really, really don't want my mother to have to bury me. I was like, she's already buried one of her children. Please don't make her have to do this again for me. And again, it was the meds, it was the stress, it was the anxiety, it was the fact that, you know, I had been in labor for 17 hours and nothing was happening, and I was getting rushed to do this major surgery. I mean, it was all the above, and I was just so freaking out and so scared. And the nurse, she was beautiful. She just handled everything with such grace and just talked me through everything, let me know that it was okay for me to be anxious. It was okay for me to be freaking out, but she was going to be there for me. She was going to make sure that if anything happened, obviously, well, I don't know if this is obvious because I think I've asked this question, but you don't get put under when you have a C-section. You just go in, you're numbed from the waist down, and that's it. So like when your baby comes out, you can still hold him. I did not necessarily know that. But you're awake, and you're able to feel from the waist up. So I was very coherent, but I was very, very, very scared and terrified. And the nurses just were everything that I needed in the time that I needed it. It didn't matter what it was. If I remember, I remember I really wanted Gatorade, and I couldn't have Gatorade. And so what the nurse did is she took my Gatorade bottle and she poured it over ice, and then she drained the Gatorade out from the ice, so that when I sucked on the ice, because the ice chips was what I could have, I tasted the Gatorade on the, I mean, they just did everything for me. I didn't feel as though when they looked at me, they saw a Black woman. And I mean, obviously when they look at me, they saw a Black woman, but with the articles and the research and everything that I have been told and I've studied about the experiences that Black women have had in hospitals, not feeling like they're being heard, or feeling like they're being, you know, rushed over information, or feeling like they're being coerced to do something because these are doctors, and feeling inferior to the people in the room around them. I didn't experience any of that. I just felt very taken care of. I don't know what other things were going on in these women's lives. The pandemic was obviously going on. I'm sure that the women there, some of them had kids or husbands. I'm sure they were working extensive hours, and they came in and put their families and their lives and things that are important to them, they compartmentalize that and put it on the back burner to make sure that I was taken care of, and to make sure that in my time of need and stress and anxiety and vulnerability, that they were there for me. And I can't speak highly enough about them. I feel sorry for the women who don't get my experience, because like I just said, it's such a vulnerable time for a woman. It's your first pregnancy. Even if it's not your first, it's still a very vulnerable time. I don't mean to diminish that women who have had multiple children are less vulnerable, because that's not true. I think you are a little bit more prepared, or maybe in the scheme of life, a lot more prepared. But I feel sad for the women who don't have my experience, because the nursing staff, the doctors, everybody just made sure that I felt listened to, and that if I had any questions or any concerns or any needs or wants, it was not an imposition. It was not at all anything I should worry about. All I needed to do was call somebody, and multiple people would be in to make sure that I had what I had. I'm very grateful. Very, very grateful for how I felt like I was treated. I felt like race wasn't an issue. I felt like people wanted to come in and get to know me. While I was waiting for my water to break, I talked with multiple nurses about my family and about Harry Potter. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan. About Vampire Diaries. I love the Vampire Diaries. About sports. I'm a through and through basketball fan. I love basketball. I love football, but I love basketball. Everybody just really put forth the effort and didn't make me feel at all like what I looked like was an issue. I don't even know if it was an issue. I don't really know. I maybe they just looked at me and just saw some 9.5-month pregnant woman who, was nervous because her parents weren't there. Maybe that's what they saw. And if it is, I'm so grateful for it, because I was able to focus on what I needed to focus on, pushing or getting ready to meet my child for the first time, or dealing with my recovery, getting what I needed to make sure I was taken care of, even though I didn't feel like eating or showering. I was being encouraged to make sure that I was continuing to take care of myself. Those were all the things that I was able to focus on, because the nurses and the doctors were there, made me feel like they had everything else, like they were handling everything else. I was okay. They had my back. And it was I could not have had a better experience. Really, I could not. So, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I want to know about your experience during COVID, as you went in for labor and delivery. Does anything sound familiar? Let me know, guys. And have a good rest of the night, and I'll talk to you guys later, okay? Bye.